Thank you all for coming. As you know, we have tried to roll out some initiatives that we think will make Georgia a stronger, more prosperous state that can help all of our citizens achieve a better education and a better future. We have many things today that will help in the realm of education, help foster and promote our economy, and help in the general well-being of our citizens. So I will be introducing members of our caucus who will bring to you many key elements of the Democratic plan for the state Senate. First of all, I would like to introduce Senator Ed Harbison. Senator Harbison is chair of our Veterans, Military, and Homeland Security Committee in the Senate. Senator Harbison.
In that vein of making sure that we look out for all of our citizens, obviously we want to make sure that we pay especial attention to our military people. They serve our country, they make us safe, they make a lot of sacrifices. So in that vein, we think that we should look out for them in the academic arena. So in that vein, we're asking that the Senate pass a bill that would say that if the military person has served in the military and has a kind of credit that will be equated to the kind of credit he would have in college, that he'd be granted that particular credit. We already exempt military people from physical education, and I think we should do the same thing for related subjects that they have in the military. For example, as a Marine, I served in Vietnam, and I would get credit for being a fireproof technician, a firearm specialist, that kind of thing. So that's a kind of common sense transition. In addition to that, we will make sure that we pass another piece of legislation that would be exempting some of the fees, not on a permanent basis, but making sure that those fees would be paid in a timely manner, or perhaps even in installments, to make sure that the veteran is not turned away because of the lack of the bureaucracy of the VA administration, which may take 6 weeks to get the veterans' money going, because that does happen. So in that vein, we'll be looking out for our military people, because obviously they're a vital cog in our community. Senator Lester Jackson.
I'm here as a former veteran of the United States Navy, and I'm here proudly standing with Senator Ed Harbison and State Senator Emanuel Jones, also veterans, and we're going to introduce legislation for our men and women that stand for freedom, not only in this country, but stand for freedom across this world. And this legislation we're going to introduce is common sense legislation, just common sense. And what it does is it would establish that veterans can begin school, secondary education, before their tuition and fees are paid for. Because we know that VA benefits are late. And we're standing here with the people like Amy Noble, who had to drop out of school, secondary education, because the Veteran Administration didn't have her VA funds to the school in time. So we want to stand with her and thousands of other veterans to make sure that they have the opportunity to go to secondary education. They fought for this country. They stand for freedom across this world. They should have the opportunity to go to school. We have some more common sense veterans legislation. And we're going to establish a task force to look at how this state can establish better veterans relations once our fighting heroes are released from the armed services. They committed their lives. They risked their lives. Their families sacrificed their time and their commitment to this country. It's time that we need to look at how we can benefit them as a state once they're released, once their commitment to and their service are finished. We need to make sure that homeless veterans are no more in the state of Georgia. We need to make sure that every veteran has the opportunity to succeed with job opportunities and educational growth. Thank you very much.
And on that note that Senator Jackson and Senator Harbison have said is, I'm proposing today a payroll tax credit that will be worth for businesses up to $3,500 a year that they can use against their payroll state taxes they pay. And the point of this is that it'll be for any veteran post 9/11 who has been unemployed for at least 6 months. And for those who don't know, particularly for our young men and women coming back from Iraq and Afghanistan, particularly the 18 to 24-year-old age group, there's about a 30% unemployment rate. And as Senator Jackson has said and Senator Harbison said, they put their lives on the line. Their families have sacrificed. And this is an incentive for our businesses in this state to employ these young men and women as they come back. And so, again, it would be a $3,500 tax credit that the business could take immediately against their payroll taxes that they pay the state of Georgia, and it would be up for a year. And some people said, well, what does that mean in the sense of the cost of the state? Well, on average, we're paying out $135 for unemployment insurance. Within 26 weeks, you've collected more than $3,500. So this actually would hopefully help save the state money and at the same time employ our veterans and be productive citizens again at this time. Now, there's one other bill I will be introducing also, which is not about veterans, but it's called the Taxpayer Receipt Act. And what this bill will do is, working with the Department of Revenue, is going to create a website there on the Department of Revenue's website where any Georgian can go onto the website and put in what they paid in state income taxes for the previous year. And they can know exactly where their tax dollars went. Currently, you can go online and look at the Georgia state budget, but that's nearly 200 lines, and it's definitely not user-friendly. And so this gives, for the first time, citizens of this state, the taxpayers of this state, to have a chance to actually see how their tax dollars are spent. And it'll be broken down by departments, and particularly under certain categories like education and corrections. So an example would be, let's say you paid $3,000 in state income tax. You would probably pay nearly $1,600 into the education for K through 12 and higher education, those areas. And that's going to be introduced. And for those who might have asked about, do we have support? This is a bipartisan bill. Senator Judson Hill and Senator Chance, along with several of my fellow Democrats, have signed on to this bill. And so, again, it's another common sense approach. And I hope our colleagues on the other side of the aisle also work with us on these bills we're proposing today. Now, at this time, I'd like to introduce Senator Nan Orrock, who's going to be talking to us about several different bills also. Senator Orrock.
Thank you very much, Chairman Stoner. Good to be with you today and stand with my fellow Democrats. We're happy to be rolling out this agenda on our educated workforce, economic security, and strong families in Georgia. I want to flag for you a bill that will be introduced in the House and the Senate, and this is a bill to prohibit Georgia state agencies from contracting with companies that outsource their employment on state projects outside the United States. We want to keep jobs in Georgia. We want to keep our tax dollars working for Georgia's economy, not sending them off to offshore jobs in other places. This is going on in significant measure already. It's been determined that the state has contracts for our food stamps benefits program, for example, and that work is not being conducted in Georgia. That work is being conducted offshore by people who live and work in another economy of another nation far across the seas. We want to bring jobs home, put our tax dollars to work in our economy. So this will require that the agencies contract with private companies that are going to employ people within the United States. That is our Keep Jobs in Georgia bill. And we, again, would hope for some strong bipartisan support of keeping jobs in Georgia. Secondly, we've been engaged in the interim in a process to establish a health insurance marketplace. We are introducing a bill in the House and the Senate. Pat Gardner is leading on the House side, and this is a bill to create an insurance marketplace to spur competition and to let consumers, both small businesses and individuals, be able to make informed choices about their insurance policy purchases. We need to do it. Currently, if we stand and wait on the federal courts to act, we are leaving Georgia behind. We need to be prepared for all contingencies, for the Affordable Care Act to be the law of the land, which it is today, or if parts of it are addressed in federal court decisions, we need to be prepared to move forward with a Georgia health insurance marketplace. So we will be introducing that legislation on both sides, the House and the Senate. Finally, every family in the sound of my voice has been touched by age-related conditions. Alzheimer's and dementia, senility are prevalent and growing across our population. Enormous burden to families, a terrifically challenging situation for our infrastructure and a high cost of our tax dollars. We are supporting creating a blue ribbon study commission to prepare a strategic plan for Georgia to address age-related issues. That we think is a smart thing to do. It will support families. It will support having an infrastructure in place in terms of services, medical, and also helping families identify these problems before they hit them full force. So those are all addressing different aspects of our economy and the needs of our families. We want to move forward to hear from Senator Fort, if he is with us, who's going to talk about some particular insurance mandates for childhood cancer and autism. Thank you.
Last year in 2011, unfortunately, the legislature passed and the governor signed into law a bill that would in effect allow insurance companies to circumvent many mandates that have passed over the year, insurance mandates, healthcare mandates that have passed over the years to protect Georgia's families and children. There is no more important responsibility that we have than protecting Georgia's children. And that's why we're going to introduce two pieces of legislation. One which would put back in force the insurance mandate to protect children who are victimized by cancer, childhood cancer. And then also we will introduce a piece of legislation which will put back into effect mandates for autism. These are two diseases that are a scourge of Georgia's children. We ought to be in the business as a legislature protecting children, not stripping mandates and making them more susceptible to illness and disease.
Thank you, Senator Ford. I am quite concerned about what we did last year regarding Hope Scholarship in pre-K, particularly pre-K. We stripped 20 days out of our pre-K learning environment. We took away 20 days from the strides that have been made in early childhood with Bright from the Start since 1992, and when it was fully funded in 1995 for all Georgia families. We are presently serving about 86,000 children. We went from having classroom sizes of 20 last year to 22, and we all know, research says, the smaller class sizes are better. We have teachers who have finished college, have bachelor degrees, and many of them are certificated teachers who are our lead teachers in pre-K. They are cut by 1 month, and we have had many teachers leaving the profession or leaving the school systems as a result of this. We need to fully fund our pre-K program. We're saying 10 more days. We need the 20 days. Our children need to have the support and the help so that they can start off in school and that they can become, when they finish high school and college, good contributing members of our society. So we need to urge my colleagues, I want my colleagues to urge the governor. We need to find a way to fully support and fund our pre-K program. And that is what the resolution will do that I'm going to introduce. And I look forward to having that debate and making sure that our children, our smallest children and our families are taken care of from the earliest ages possible. Now, Senator Carter will talk to us a little bit about Hope
County. And let me begin with this. The governor's so-called Hope reform from last year has failed. Now that we've lived with the plan for a year, it is clear that first, the plan did not achieve its stated purpose of ensuring that Hope lives within its means. And second, the plan will not only harm the hardworking, high-achieving students who depend on Hope, but ultimately it will be terrible for Georgia's economy. Now that we've seen the governor's budget and the reports from the administration officials that administer the various programs, it's clear that despite the changes that were made last year, Hope still does not live within its means. The governor's budget calls for it to dip into its reserves again this year. That means it is still spending more than it should. And even more troubling is that the reason they are dipping into the reserves is to mask the true failure of the plan. that according to the Georgia Student Finance Commission, we will reduce the lottery reserves to the minimum next year. And then the full impact of this so-called reform will be felt. Within a few years, by 2016, the Hope Scholarship will pay less than half of the cost of going to college. Under the governor's plan, that gets worse, and Hope vanishes over time. This means every single year there will be fewer students who can afford to go to college. We already know, based upon what we have been told by the administration, that because of last year's changes to the Hope grant, there are 4,200 fewer students in our state's technical schools. And it appears from their numbers that there are at least 10,000 fewer Hope scholars than there were before the plan took effect. Now, any Hope plan that reduces the number of students who get advanced education has to be called a failure, not only for those students, but for our economy. The fact is that the governor's plan has turned Hope into an entitlement program for the wealthiest people in our state, rather than a program that ensures that all of the hardworking, high-achieving students who deserve Hope can go to college. Now, we need and we propose today a real Hope Scholarship so that we can educate people for success, so that in our technical schools, in our colleges, and so that we can build a strong economy. The choice is this. As we face the future and try to build a strong and prosperous Georgia, we can stick with last year's plan where Hope vanishes for most Georgians and we send fewer and fewer people to college. Or we have a plan that is both more fiscally responsible and ensures that every year we maximize the number of high-achieving students who go to school. Now, before I outline the specific proposals, I think it's important, as many of us have mentioned, this Hope Scholarship does not have to be a partisan issue. These are not tax dollars. These are dollars that are paid into a lottery fund voluntarily by people who play the lottery. There's no political philosophy at issue here. It's just a factual question about what is better for our state. Now that we know the true facts, there are many legislators of both parties who are frustrated with the failure of last year's plan, and we look forward to working with all of them on these Hope reforms. Now, we present 4 initiatives to ensure that Hope doesn't vanish and that our best and brightest students from across the state can afford to go to college. First, with respect to the Hope Scholarship, specifically, our plan is simple. Just as there was when Hope began, there will be an income cap. In addition to the academic requirements that are there that ensure that it goes to the highest achieving and the best and brightest students, this cap will be set each year, and it will be set as high as possible to maximize the number of students who get the full Hope Scholarship. This year, for this next fiscal year, if the cap is set at a family income of $140,000, over 90% of Georgia families would still be eligible. And in some parts of Georgia, it would cover every single Hope Scholar. And this plan is more fiscally sound than the plan that we've just implemented. Instead of depleting the reserves or the rainy day fund, Hope would run a surplus with a cap of $140,000. In fact, we wouldn't have to spend any of the lottery reserves for several years, even with that very high cap at $140,000. In 2016, when the governor's plan is paying less than half of the cost of college, this plan would still be providing the full scholarship for all the students whose families make less than $140,000 per year. In other words, unlike last year's plan, the scholarship would be serving its purpose and the plan would be fiscally sound. In addition, with respect to the Hope grant, as I mentioned before, the head of Georgia's technical schools announced that as a result of last year's changes to the Hope grant, there are 4,200 fewer students in our technical schools. Everyone agrees that if we want a strong economy, we need more students in our technical schools. This is the fast track to jobs. It is a fast track to a growing economy, and we have legislation that will repeal last year's failed changes to the Hope grant. The next piece of legislation that I'll talk about is a plan that would require a constitutional amendment. The plan would place a student member on the Board of Regents. It has become clear throughout this process as we discuss higher education that there is no student voice that is being listened to effectively, and they have been left out of the discussion. That piece of legislation would require a student voice elected by the various student bodies of the schools in our university system to serve on the Board of Regents. Lastly, my colleague, Senator Freddie Sims, will describe the governor's will describe the Zell Miller Scholarship reforms that we propose. But I'll just mention before Senator Sims comes up. Okay. Lastly, Senator Sims has authored a piece of legislation that I will describe. The governor's plan is likely to be worse than what we've described. In order to make because of the impact of the Zell Miller Scholarship that was created last year, in order to make it financially sound, that policy of providing full tuition for students who have a certain SAT score has resulted in the following. 80% of those Zell Miller scholars go to 2 schools. And those 2 schools are the most expensive schools in the state. In addition, there are entire communities in Georgia that are shut out of the Zell Miller Scholarship under the current plan. So what we will, and as tuition continues to go up, we will spend more and more of the scarce resources on those students at the most expensive schools at the expense of everyone else. And that will cause that Hope Scholarship to vanish for everyone else. And it will accelerate the decline and accelerate the failure that we've described with respect to Hope. The plan to remedy that problem is the Zell Miller Scholarship, rather than being tied to the SAT score, it will be the best and brightest from every community in Georgia and will include the top 3% of the graduating students from every high school. That will do several things. Number one, it will ensure that every community participates in the Zell Miller Scholarship program, not just ones that are concentrated in Metro Atlanta in the wealthiest areas of the state. In addition, it will make sure that the Zell Miller scholars are distributed more evenly throughout our university system rather than concentrated at the most expensive schools. In addition, it will be far less expensive than the governor's plan, and there will not be the types of problems that we've had this year with respect to the number of students who are coming in. It will be much easier to predict the number of Zell Miller scholars. The governor's office has been trying to come with clean numbers with respect to the Zell Miller Scholarship Program, and no one has seen them yet. Our plan would be far easier to administer, would be less expensive, would include all the people of Georgia, and would not essentially would not erode the Hope Scholarship to the same extent.
As you can see, the Democrats in the Senate have prepared plans, policies that will improve the state and help many, many Georgians. I want to commend them on their hard work and effort. They are not waiting back to negatively respond to some Republican agenda. They are trying to move forward with positive and concrete ways to make Georgia better. And I thank each of them for the time and effort they've done all this work. I also want to commend the caucus for taking the position that we are willing to work with Republicans. We want them to listen to these ideas, to offer their input, and together we can work to build a better state. And hopefully they will reach out to us and take us up on our offer. We will come back to you on personal privilege points around day 39 to report. Are there any questions?